Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robert Halfon. I'm a member of Parliament for Harlow and also the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party. It's a huge honour to follow Ron Prosor, and I was surprised he didn't say one thing that I've often heard him say. He likened some of the Gulf Arab countries. He said, remember the Muppets and the old guy shouting from the balcony, it's a terrible show, we're not actually doing anything about it. And I remember that analogy very, very well indeed. Now, it is a huge honour for me to be here today, and I congratulate the Jewish News and everybody else who have sponsored it and supported this conference. I'm glad that Ron ended on an optimistic note. I have a kind of some views that there are two or three terrible things that have happened, but I am an optimist, and because of that, I think I will start off with a little story that I remember reading once of two Jews who were in Berlin in the 1930s, and they were sitting on a park bench, and one was reading no doubt the Berlin Jewish News, and the other one was reading Der Stürmer. And the Jew who was reading the Berlin Jewish News looked at his friend reading Der Stürmer, and he said, "Why on earth are you reading this Hitler rag? How could you?" And the Jew who was reading Der Stürmer, he said, "Look, when you read the Jewish news, you read about pogroms and misery. When I read Der Stürmer, I read that Jews control the world, we have all the money, and everything is right." And I think that is very important. When we consider these things, we have to be optimists. And it was Golda Meir who said that pessimism is a luxury that no Jew can allow himself. But I do want to start off on a pessimistic note, and just to say really three things that I found profoundly depressing. The first, I noticed that when Prosor talks about Orange mobile phones, Israel has used Orange mobile phone technology for many years as the mobile phone provider. I know it's a sister provider. But for the head of Orange telephone network to say that he wished that Orange was not in Israel after having provided a service for many years, in order to try and get business with the Arab countries, I think was incredibly damaging and incredibly distressing and symptomatic of the problems that Israel faces. It doesn't matter that he subsequently apologised. It was the fact that the head of Orange actually said this in the first place, that it's all right to have these telephone networks in totalitarian countries in the world, but in Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East, the owner of one of the main telephone networks mobile telephone networks said that he wished that his company were not in Israel. And if I was an Israeli, I would not use Orange ever again. In fact, we should boycott Orange rather than the other way around. But it's symptomatic of the boycott campaign that I know has been discussed today. The second profoundly depressing thing, and I have to say, I know this is not a party political event, but I have to make a political point here, is that it seems incredible to me that one of the candidates for the leadership of the Labour Party can actually get up and say to defend Hamas and defend Hezbollah, and has invited Hamas and Hezbollah to the House of Commons, and that person isn't a fringe person on Speaker's Corner. He's not part of an extremist movement. He's standing as a candidate for one of the major political parties in the Western world. And I find that, again, profoundly depressing. And this links into what was being said before, in that there is a seamless theme that it is okay to be mainstream, extreme anti-Israel comment and activity has become the norm. It's become part of the mainstream, not part of the extreme. And Ron talked finally about the United Nations, and again, the third thing, he said there were three things. There are many things the United Nations have done, but one of the worst was their report on harming of children in conflict, recommending that Israel should be added to the list of shame. Israel, the land of democracy, of freedom, of the way it treats its children, is very special indeed. And for the United Nations to pass a motion like that, again, shows that extreme anti-Israel criticism has become the mainstream. And that is incredibly worrying. And I know that Inat, who was interviewing Ron Prosser, has talked in the past about public relations warfare. And I believe, and I've argued this for some time, that we are losing the public relations warfare by not just a mile, by hundreds of miles. I think that the fact that that mainstream, that anti-Israel criticism, extreme anti-Israel criticism, has become mainstream as part of our discourse, out of all proportion to anything that goes on in most other countries in the world, shows that we are losing the battle. And we need to rethink, all of us, how we use public relations, but particularly social media. And I think we are light years behind the opposition when it comes to social media. And I think all of us need to do some pretty tough soul searching about social media and what we should be doing and how we win the war. People always, when they talk about public relations within Israel, somebody comes along and says, let's start an organisation. And then they start an organisation and there's a lovely dinner in a very nice hotel. But the same thing carries on. It's not about necessarily spending money. Much of this social media does not cost a lot. But it needs to be organised and it needs to be efficient. And we will not win this battle. We will not turn anti-extremist, anti-Israel extremist activity. We will not take it away from the mainstream of our political life until we start winning the PR battle. And I said that I was pessimistic about three things, but following Golda Meir, I'm also optimistic about three things. One is that it's tempting for us to live in the siege mentality and think everything is terrible. Actually, we have a lot of friends. I know in my party we have a lot of friends. I know in the Labour Party there are a lot of friends too. There are a lot of people who are behind the scenes who are very, very supportive of the state of Israel. It may not be, they may not do everything we want them to do. They're not going to give us a blank check. It's not their number one issue, even though it may be the number one issue for us. But nevertheless, we should not discount that and not forget it and not think that everyone is against us. The second thing I would say is that I believe that with the extreme Islamism, with ISIS and what is going on in the world in Syria and elsewhere in Sudan, I actually think that rational people who are not necessarily political actually start to have sympathy with the state of Israel, because they get to understand that actually all these problems that are going on in the Middle East, it's not just Israel, everywhere is facing these problems, and they get to understand that Israel faces these problems. And we have to present Hamas and Hezbollah as on the conveyor belt to ISIS. The same thing, maybe not with difference of degrees, but on the conveyor belt. And so I think that actually this extreme Islamism, whether it's at home or whether it's abroad, actually will make people who are not politically motivated, the normal man and woman in the street, potentially much more sympathetic to the state of Israel than otherwise they might have been. The third reason why I'm optimistic is because I'm a conservative. I believe in capitalism. And the fact is that Israel technology triumphs the world. We're moving towards more renewable energy. For example, we're less dependent on Middle Eastern oil regimes. And the technology, it was interesting, the man from Orange was criticising Israel, yet in all the phones these companies use at Israel made computer chips. And so I actually believe that markets speak volumes, and the genius and entrepreneurialism of the state of Israel means that business will triumph. All over the world, American companies, British companies are buying up Israel companies. I read recently that BlackBerry bought an Israeli company called Watchdogs, because it's the most secure company in the world in terms of transferring of files, and it helps BlackBerry boost its credibility as a company that provides internet and smartphone security. So it is pretty incredible. The markets will speak volumes. Markets will triumph over politics. And the fact is that all the boycotts in the world, if the people in the West and other countries in the world need Israeli technology, all the boycotts in the world won't stop them from trying to buy it or trying to access it. So we mustn't be too pessimistic We have our friends. Extreme Islamism is showing people what Israel faces. And Israel technology, I think, will ensure, and entrepreneurism will ensure that all Israel triumphs against the odds, despite the boycotts, despite the comments from people like the head of Orange, despite having candidates for leadership of political parties, and despite the United Nations. And on that, it gives me huge pleasure now to introduce Martin Lindick, who was the United States ambassador to Israel and has been part of the negotiations, very important negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians for some time. So I think it's being shown here on video, and I thank you, sir, for doing this, and I wish you all well. Thank you.